While I was editing my previous video on Legal Eagle, if you guys will recall, I actually broke into that video in order to give you a quick analysis of the new footage of Alex Pretti from an incident involving him and ICE/Border Patrol from 11 days prior. And the reason I thought it was so important to break in with that new information was because a lot of people were going to take that incident from 11 days earlier and try to use it to justify the shooting that occurred 11 days later. And I wanted you guys to understand that despite the fact that I have an agenda, I have political opinions, and that all is something that is factually true because everybody has an agenda, everybody has a political opinion. I respect you too much to lie to you and tell you throughout the whole Renee Good situation that only the information known to the officers at the time goes into play on whether or not it was objectively reasonable for that shooting to occur, then to suddenly flip it and say that this information that was not known to the Border Patrol agents that happened 11 days earlier was somehow going to be a factor. And I thought genuinely that would be the number one uphill battle that I was going to fight based on that new information. However, I miscalculated. However, I misinterpreted the stupidity of the left because it turns out they decided to develop a new asinine and ridiculous conspiracy theory about this video from 11 days earlier, and that is that Border Patrol decided that they were going to assassinate him 11 days later based on the fact that he spat at an agent and he kicked a taillight. Now, of course, there's no evidence at all whatsoever that these are the same agents. There's no evidence at all whatsoever that Border Patrol knew who this person was. And the idea that you would shove a lady that may or may not have been obstructing an ICE operation in the hopes that Pretti would get involved, thus you could try to take him down for resisting arrest so that you could discover mid-altercation that he's carrying a firearm so that one of your agents could then take the firearm, possibly a situation where there's a negligent discharge, and then in response to that possible negligent discharge, you were going to kill him as a part of an elaborate assassination plot. Obviously absurd, ridiculous, and asinine. But the thing is, this is what the left is going with. This is the actual argument we are seeing from people like Kyle Kulinski, who posted this video while he's laying down in his bed, coming up with this theory, and not only asserting this as a possible theory, but saying that it's actually the simplest explanation for what we're seeing, because again, what these people want to do is stoke up violence, stoke up political hatred, because they don't give a damn about the consequences, even though those consequences are being paid in blood right now by people on their side. So this is what we're going to talk about today, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
What's up, y'all? So, video just came out of Alex Pretti, and it was, I guess, a few days before he was murdered. And he is protesting on the sidewalk with a bunch of other protesters. And I gotta be honest with you, he's being based as shit. He is screaming at them. He's saying, fuck you, screaming at the ICE criminals. Fuck you, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. You guys are fucking criminals. Every decision you've made in your life is fucking shit. Like, he was going in. But, like, all of it perfectly legal, perfectly acceptable. Just being a douchebag to the criminals. That's, that's good. That's a good thing in my book. And they get in their car to leave. And so he runs up and, like, kicks the bumper of the car. And you can hear it. The video is from, like, I want to say, like, 40, 50 yards away.
So one of the things that you should take note of throughout the whole course of this 4-minute video from Kyle Kulinski is that the way that he describes these events, not factual, not reality, not actually representative of the truth, and a big red flag for me is when people don't show you the whole video that they're talking about or even the key portions of the video, because if you watch the video, what you find out is that Alex Pretti was not a regular ordinary protester. And by the way, notice how we've moved from regular illegal observer who is not getting involved in the situation to now a protester who's actively involved in the situation, but in reality, what he was doing was obstructing ICE agents. Now, of course, you're allowed to swear at ICE agents, you are allowed to blow the whistles, again, that's annoying. I will contest on whether or not you're allowed to do that in order to alert the criminal, in order to make sure that they escape when there's a mid-raid, but whatever, we'll set it aside at this moment in time and say that all of that annoying stuff is allowed. But what Pretti was doing was obviously instigating a physical conflict with the ICE agents. He actually spat at one of the ICE agents, trying to get it in the door.
Look at you! Pepper spray, bitch!
which by the way was not revealed by the initial angle of this new video. There was an alternate angle that it was revealed by, and of course he decided that he was going to damage the property of the ICE agents as they were leaving. So after they got what they wanted, which was ICE agents be gone, Pretti then attacked. Here's the video of that.
They get in their car to leave, and so he runs up and like kicks the bumper of the car, and you can hear it.
We arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at the agents as they walked back to their vehicles. When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight.
Now, Kyle, of course, supports this, and the reason why he supports this is because his support of this benefits him extraordinarily. This stupid-ass video has 420,000 views. This low-effort content is getting a lot of attention, making him a lot of money, and make no mistake about it, he is making money off stoking up his audience's hysteria, whipping them up into a frenzy, and of course, getting them out and getting them in more of these violent altercations because their buddy, Kyle Kulinski, is endorsing it. It's based as hell.
And so he runs up and like kicks the bumper of the car, and you can hear it. The video is from like, I want to say like 40, 50 yards away. Somebody else is recording, but you could hear him clearly, and you see him run up and like kick the back of their Tahoe or their Suburban.
So again, big red flag for anybody who's trying to stoke you up into a violent frenzy like Kyle Kulinski is right here, is the fact that he's lying about things that don't need to be lied about. So he's saying that Alex Pretti kicked the bumper of the Tahoe or Suburban, even though we all know from the video that originally dropped, he obviously kicked the taillight. In fact, he broke the taillight off the vehicle, but for whatever reason, Kyle Kulinski is ghosting this particular fact. He is not sharing this information with you, because again, he's all about misleading his audience, and he's telling you all of this concocted story so that you come under the impression that ICE actually did a targeted assassination on this guy, which by the way, we will talk about why this is so dangerous a little bit later on. But let us hear Kyle recount events in this disingenuous way.
So they stop, they get out, and then they just beat his ass. Like, and it was like he got jumped. So this is like, he got jumped multiple times, and this time it was pretty severe. Like 4 of them, 5 of them get out, walk up to him, start beating his ass, and then they just casually get back in their car and leave. And that's where he wound up breaking the rib, which people were talking about the other day, that he had a broken rib.
So again, this is just a false characterization of the events. They did not get out and then jump him multiple times, beat his ass, or anything Kyle described. What actually happened was they were trying to get him on the ground. Likely they were initially intending on arresting him because he had just assaulted ICE agents. By the way, broke the taillight, not tapped the bumper or kicked the bumper as Kyle Kulinski described. And again, you could see this video for yourself.
When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. The man in our footage is wearing a similar outfit to what Pretti was wearing on the day he was killed. What appears to be a gun is also visible above his waistband. Here, he continues to stand at the scene.
However, there was a crowd there. They seemed to be antagonistic along with this individual, so it appears that they decided to back off in this particular scenario. And the irony is, if they would have made the arrest in this particular situation, charged him appropriately with not only impeding but assaulting federal agents, he might have been in jail at the time of the shooting. But Kyle is describing it as, oh, he kind of tapped the Suburban. I guess I can't absolutely lie about that. I'm gonna just lie about it mostly. And then they just jumped him. They savagely beat him for no reason, even though, again, them not arresting him was giving him a break. And by the way, he actually had the firearm on him at this moment in time. I don't know if the agents saw it in that scenario. I don't know if they were concerned about it. But yeah, they decided to not make the arrest in this particular case, even though, again, this guy's caught on video assaulting ICE agents. He spat in the car door. You can see it for yourself. Kyle Kulinski ghosts this fact. And then he broke their taillight taillight. Again, another fact that is ghosted by Kyle Kulinski. But there was no jumping, there was no beatdown, this was not gang violence. But again, Kyle Kulinski wants to stoke up the tensions because this stupid ass video has 400,000+ views going up, by the way, and this is based on the fact that he's willing to lie and pander to his audience. But get a load of his interpretation of this information.
So, look, the thing that everybody's talking about now, which I think is perfectly fair, is, was this a targeted assassination? Because what ICE has been doing, as everybody's seen, they go around recording everybody. They go around recording all the observers, all the protesters, and, you know, some of them slipped up and literally said, like, yeah, the reason I'm recording you is because now you're going in a nice little database where you're going to be considered a domestic terrorist.
So first of all, it is not a logical, intuitive leap to assume that because he got into an altercation with whoever these agents are, by the way, there were 3,000 agents deployed to the Minneapolis area by President Trump. This is something that the left has complained about, so many different agents being sent there, that then 11 days later, they came up with this magical theory of how they were going to lure him into a situation where he got between that woman just so they could discover his gun, just so that they could assassinate him. It's an absurd proposition, but he says it with a straight face. And again, most of the people in the comments are on board for this. And this is madness in every possible way, because if you really think about what Kyle is trying to tell his audience, is basically the ICE agents, Homeland Security or CBD, who actually did this, but Kyle just calls them all ICE, are actually documenting all these different people, putting them in a terrorism database so that they could later on carry out assassinations. So essentially, he's making the case that even if you stop protesting right now, if you back off from the situation, if you stop engaging with ICE in obstructive ways, they'll still come after you later and kill you for it. And that is something that you should be watching out for. And again, these people tell you constantly that ICE is the brown shirts, ICE is the Gestapo, ICE is the Nazis. And if you actually believe all of these premises, the logical conclusion of what you should do is lash out violently against federal agents, kill them before they kill you, because again, according to Kyle Kulinski, you're not even going to get a chance, because if they've decided you slighted them in the past, then they're just going to come out and kill you in the future without any provocation or justification, which is how Kyle describes the later on incident.
Because what ICE has been doing, as everybody's seen, they go around recording everybody. They go around recording all the observers, all the protesters, and, you know, some of them slipped up and literally said, like, yeah, the reason I'm recording you is because now you're going in a nice little database where you're going to be considered a domestic terrorist.
Now, Kyle says, oh, we actually have agents slipping up saying that you're going to be in a terrorism database, but make no mistake about it, one agent saying that does not mean there's this vast terrorism database that all these anti-ICE protesters / rioters are actually in. I think what ICE is actually doing is recording and documenting the license plates in case there are incidents in the future, and they can use that evidence, the documentation of their license plates, to prove that, yes, they're part of a concerted effort in order to block them in order to terrorize them, in order to obstruct their operations. And since you're in public view and you're allowed to record people in public, which by the way works when it comes to recording the ICE agents, it also works the other way around. That's why body cams are considered perfectly acceptable to be worn by police officers. This is a non-issue, but of course Kyle has to drum it up into an issue because it all feeds into his false narrative.
They're actually doing it. Anybody who, like, opposes the regime is a domestic terrorist. So stop and think about it. You got a guy who's protesting, yelling at and demeaning these ICE thugs. He gets jumped by them, gets his rib broken. He's out there a couple days later. They have his name, they know he's in a database. And then they roll up on him and basically assault him with pepper spray when he's trying to protect a woman who they shove. And they murder him. Like 8 of them are on top of him, jumping him like they're in a gang, and then they murder him. I think Occam's razor at this point is that this was a targeted assassination, right? Like, is it just a coincidence that they beat his ass and broke his ribs a few days before.
Again, this is just insane in every possible way. Occam's razor at this point is that this is a targeted assassination. Are you kidding me? This is absurd and ridiculous. Again, he's like, they have his name, they got his information. How did they get his name? How did they get his information? If you actually look at that incident, it looks like they were trying to arrest this individual. Guess what? They did not complete the arrest. They didn't take him into custody. So the idea that 11 days later, very likely completely different border agents decided that they were going to kill this guy, that they were going to assassinate him, somebody that they knew and apparently knew carried a firearm on him, but they didn't approach him directly in order to conduct the assassination. They actually baited him with the woman that was shoved in order to intervene, so it looked like he was assaulting an officer when he put his hands on the officer in order to stop them, going by Kyle's characterization, from shoving that woman, in order to get into a situation, again, where they discovered the gun and shot him. To Kyle, that's Occam's razor. Simplest explanation. Obviously, these situations are related, and again, the reason why he's saying this is because he wants you agitated, he wants you angry, and he wants you out in the streets conducting violence. Remember, he said it was based. It was cool that he was doing this stuff, and he minimized the violence that was committed by Pretti in that situation 11 days ago because he wants this to happen again.
Well, now that that video came out, yet again, right-wingers are telling on themselves. And now they're all going like, huh, see? Some peaceful protester here.
So again, Kyle, of course, withholds all this different information from his audience. Make no mistake about it. There are people that are trying to make the case that because he was in this particular violent altercation that he initiated, according to the video, with ICE agents, that therefore it was justified to kill him later. Those people are not understanding of what the legal standard is. And I will say, while we should scour for more footage, because maybe there was something that occurred prior to the incident on the same day of the actual incident where he was shot that might have led the agents to believe that he was violent or the woman was violent, and that could be revealed later. As of right now, it does not appear to be connected to this situation. But what Kyle's doing right there is he's like, oh, all these right-wingers are telling on themselves by saying some peaceful protester, as if that comes out of nowhere. Remember, it was the left wing, Governor Tim Walz, Ana Navarro on CNN, and multiple other people who kept saying that Alex Pretti was the best of us, that he was just a nurse, he was such a good guy, he was such a swell guy, he would never harm anyone, when it turns out that's not the case.
An extraordinary amount of backlash from the country, I think, including Republicans, including conservatives. I think Americans have had it. I think Americans will not be lied to. Frankly, they chose to, they killed the wrong guy, right? Because this is like the perfect guy. Alex Pretti is the guy you would want to date your daughter. The guy you would want your son to grow up to be, a decent human being who was serving humanity, serving sick veterans, who is, there is nothing that has been said about that man that isn't wonderful. And so they can't malign him. They can't malign him because we have the videos. So they can't say he's a would-be assassin and people believe him. They can't say, as they said, that he was there to commit a massacre. People realize they are being lied to, and they will not be lied to a second time the way they were lied to about Renee Good.
What they did was, and with Renee Good, what they did is they hit at the best of us doing activities that are at the core of what it means to be Americans.
And by the way, we all knew that was not the case. We all knew that he was a leftist agitator, even if we didn't have proof of it. We all understood that the people that are getting out there in the face of ICE agents are very likely politically motivated, not just neutral observers, as was originally pitched to us. Remember, they did this with the Renee Good case. They said that she was just dropping off her kid at the school, despite overwhelming evidence even before the videos of her clearly blocking the road for minutes on end and dancing to her own horn honking came out later on. We had witnesses day of that was saying that she was leading the protest, and yet they tried to pretend that wasn't the case because they're trying to get a narrative out there.
Well, now that that video came out, yet again, right-wingers are telling on themselves, and now they're all going like, huh, see? some peaceful protester here.
So most of the people that Kyle Kulinski is talking about that are supposedly telling on themselves, in reality are responding to the lies that were put forward by people like Kyle Kulinski, saying that this guy wouldn't hurt anyone, he'd never get into an altercation with ICE, when obviously that's not the case. Now, whether or not that has any legal bearing on this particular shooting that happened 11 days later, obviously it doesn't, but the fact is, that's addressing a completely different thing. This is like when people talk about Trayvon Martin and how he was just getting Skittles, when in reality, Trayvon Martin clearly got into a physical altercation with George Zimmerman or Michael Brown. Remember, they said that he was out spreading the word of Jesus Christ before evil white racist Darren Wilson just shot him for no reason.
Michael would be smiling, that big gentle smile that he always gives whenever he greeted you. Because Michael was a big guy, but he was a kind, gentle soul. And before he left this earth, the day that he was killed, he was out spreading the word of Jesus Christ.
When in reality, he committed a strong-arm robbery, and according to the Obama administration Department of Justice report and 3 separate autopsies, went for Wilson's gun, attacked him, and then was charging at him when he was shot and killed. So yeah, these kind of things where you're like, oh, he's an innocent Beba angel, that's why that meme exists, by the way, that's why I say that, are put out by the left all the time. And when you're addressing that, when you're going against that false narrative, they then try to pretend that they never said it, like Kyle is doing right here, and say, oh wow, they're just making a radical claim about how now you can kill him because he attacked ICE 11 days before, when most people aren't making that claim.
Guys, this is who they are. Like, they think they're vindicated now. So they think if you protest and you yell at the ICE Gestapo thugs and you kick a bumper of a Suburban, that the appropriate punishment for that is murder in the streets. Vigilante murder. Believe them when they tell you who they are.
Again, who's making this argument? Who is making this case? Kyle is just making it up because, again, he wants you out there in his audience to get ginned up by all this hysteria and lash out against ICE agents, because guess what? More instances, more sacrifices of their own people ends up benefiting Kyle Kulinski in terms of his media career and in terms of his political agenda, because if you keep getting into altercations, you're going to keep having people get injured or killed, and then Kyle is going to be able to say, wow, I guess we shouldn't have borders at all whatsoever, because look at the cost of having borders. Innocent Beba Angel Americans who are just talking to ICE agents, and maybe he slightly kicked the bumper right there, again, ghosting the fact that he spat on the agent or spat in the door of the agent trying to spit on him, again, also captured on video, and ghosting the most obvious fact, which is he broke the taillight. He didn't just kick the bumper. I don't know what Kyle's lying about that, but he is, because again, they want the violence. They want this to happen, and it makes perfect sense. Again, if you're actually under the belief that they're the Gestapo, that Nazi Germany is emerging right here, then the violence is justified. That's what they're trying to convince their audience of, because they want more instances like this, and it's absolutely disgusting. And by the way, Kyle's not the only one who is doing this. Cenk Uygur, I saw him do a segment with Anna Kasparian, and throughout the whole course of the segment, he kept saying, oh, they get to murder you 11 days after you break a taillight. They get to murder you 11 days after they break a taillight. Again, implying that he's buying into this conspiracy, that of course they were assassinating this person.
We're now killing people over taillights? With this, you want to talk about Israelification. Now we're down to, if you break a taillight, you should be executed? No, that's not anywhere near a domestic terrorist. You could say, hey, I don't like those actions. That's not a crazy thing to say, right? But saying because of that, he should have been executed 11 days later is nuts.
Now, also notable throughout the whole course of that TYT video is the fact that Cenk Uygur keeps minimizing. He keeps saying, oh, it's just property damage. He only kicked a taillight. You shouldn't murder somebody from kicking a taillight, as if that's actually the case. Again, forwarding this lie, forwarding this conspiracy.
But if they had arrested him for doing property damage, yeah, I get it. That was property damage, right?
But Cenk also completely ignores the fact, and they don't show the video proving the fact, that he was spitting at the agent. It was not just random slight property damage. It was actually assault on a federal agent, but inconvenient, so he cuts that out. But this did ultimately lead to a hilarious moment where Cenk was going to outright state the theory that this was an assassination, and Anna was like, look, this is a bridge too far.
Here. But like, oh, I'm so fragile. Oh, okay, you kicked my taillight. 11 days later, I'm going to put a bullet in your head. Okay, by the way, it might not be the same guys, etc. No, by the way, law enforcement.
Careful in the way we talk about this, Cenk. It's really important to be accurate and not draw conclusions that don't exist yet. We don't have any evidence for it.
Hold on. Well, the conclusion is they murdered him.
Now, while I appreciate the slight pushback from Anna Kasparian right there, her saying, Cenk, stop, don't speculate, don't push it too far. In reality, we are on this train, we're on this trajectory. The left is completely unhinged, and essentially what's going to ultimately end up resulting from this is another Dallas-style or Portland-style attempted ICE shooting. By the way, the Dallas one, he did fire shots at the ICE facility and killed, I believe, 3 illegal alien detainees at that facility, so great job right there. And this time, you're going to actually see agents get hit, get killed, because what these people are trying to convince their audiences of is this idea that ICE is the Gestapo, it's the brown shirts, fascism is here, and the only logical response to the Nazis re-emerging is to fight against them. Again, the generation that went overseas to kill the Nazis, we call the greatest generation in this nation, and that is going to lead to disastrous consequences, and it's really unfortunate and terrible, especially since, again, like I said when I originally covered the Pretti shooting, best case scenario, we have a negligent discharge, thus making the shooting actions technically legal, but it's still a tragic and awful shooting. And again, I knew from the jump that I disagreed with Alex Pretti on a whole host of things, that he was definitely a left-wing agitator, but the fact is, you're allowed to be disagreeable, you're allowed to be a total a-hole in a multitude of situations. That doesn't mean that your shooting is necessarily justified, and I think we should all be able to agree on this. Again, I cite Nate the lawyer's video because I think it's really intelligent and makes the case that possibly that first officer that engaged with and pushed that woman was engaging in reckless behavior, so he, out of all the officers, might be guilty of felony murder, and I find that to be a very interesting and compelling hypothesis, so I'll link that in the description so you can check it out. But the left is so far away from that. They're now talking about a targeted assassination based on a taillight, and even when Anna cuts off Cenk in this particular segment and prevents him from uttering that stupid-ass theory, that's only after like 8 minutes of Cenk repeatedly saying, kill you over a taillight, kill you over a taillight, kill you over a taillight. And by the way, while I'm calling that slight pushback, because it is, I'm just trying to be factual, even though Anna, obviously literal bestie of the channel, in reality, none of these other left-wing shows even have that. Again, they're going much further to the Kyle Kulinski level, and they're stirring up hysteria, stirring up angst, stirring up anger, and it's going to result in more bloodshed, and that's really horrible for our nation. But you know what? This is what they're committed to, and that's really all I got for you guys today. So as per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute madness going on, where now they're taking this video that proves that Pretti was not some random observer who would never do anything violent, and now using that to say he was assassinated by ICE, which, by the way, CBP is the one who did the shooting, not even ICE. But whatever. We're ending this video. Till next time.